behind that atheism, there's a reason for it. And there's a background to it. There's a background story. And that's what I'd love to tap into first. Why don't you talk with us about your childhood and how those atheistic beliefs formed? What did your home look like? Was there religion in the home? Was God a part of your home life at all?
So growing up, my family said that they believed in God, and we had a Bible under the bed, but we never really talked about God. We never talked about Jesus. We definitely never read the Bible. So the only real interactions I had with Christians were the ones that were on the street corners yelling at me that I'm going to hell and holding up the signs, and had a very aggressive approach at it. So over time, I don't know if it was the perception I had of Christians that turned me away, or just that I didn't think it was true. But gradually over time, I started watching documentaries opposing Christianity and showing that it's ridiculous. There's no good reason to believe it. And I think those ideas just stuck in my head, and I got really interested in the idea of astronomy and the universe and all the big questions. And so I'd watch the TV shows on Discovery Channel about the universe and try to learn a little bit about it. But over time, I just didn't see any good reason to believe it. There were no Christians giving me any good reason, and so I just naturally adapted the title of an atheist. And as an atheist, I did become pretty aggressive in my approach. Whenever I would interact with Christians, I would make fun of their beliefs. I would try to point out why there's no good reason to believe it. And I think I inherently, that's where my mindset was. I didn't see any good reasons, and so I became an atheist.
Mm, I think that's a very common tale, isn't it?
It is. And one other thing I forgot to mention as well that was probably going to be a large influence in it. I did. I growing up became obsessed with horror films and scaring people. And my family, we would sit around and do seances, and these were the kind of things that I don't know, I became obsessed with. And over time, I got into my atheism. I thought all of it was ridiculous, and none of it was true either. However, I do think that may have influenced a little bit as well. Just my idea of like spirituality, nothing drastic really ever happened in those situations, and so I think I just naturally adapted the idea that none of this stuff is true.
Okay, so you had tapped into what could have been, I guess, some touch point with dark spirituality, but nothing, you'd never experienced anything there.
There were a couple, but I even looking back at them now, I think there was something there, but at the time, I just would write it off. I would write it off as nothing actually happening. But looking back at everything that I went through and everything we did, I'm sure that I messed with a lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to mess with.
But at the end of the day, you felt like there was nothing, there was no there,
Mhm.
nothing worth really hanging your hat on or believing or in the dark side or the light, really.
Exactly, exactly. But I loved horror films, so naturally when got into filmmaking, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make scary movies that could scare people.
Yeah, it's an interesting genre. I know that some people really enjoy the
Yeah.
thrill of it all, the sense of fear, and the way that it makes them feel. And
Mm.
that's probably a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
Um, but back in your childhood, I'm curious. Some of those early references to Christianity seemed quite negative, very judgmental,
Mhm.
and the picture that you were getting, it seemed, was not a positive one. Two things really from that. One is, what was your impression of Christianity overall, and do you think that it fed into the contemptuousness that you felt later on?
I think overall, I just saw Christianity as just one of many religions. A documentary that really influenced me, or was called Zeitgeist, I believe was the title, and it had mentioned how Christianity was only a replication of all these other ancient myths over the centuries, and there were similarities between the story of Jesus, his life, death, and birth, or his birth, life, death, and resurrection, and it that replicated these ancient myths. And so I think I just looked at it as that's all it was. I stuck with that. I didn't attempt to do any kind of research. I just stuck with that idea that this is just one of hundreds of other religions, and no one really knows anything about reality. Um, all we know is the I was a big proponent of like evolution and the whole concept of there's no real purpose in life. This is just all there is. And I think that Christianity, I didn't even give it a second thought, to be honest with you. There was a time when I would have friends or people I interacted with that would try to bring me to church, and I didn't want anything to do with it. I thought it was fake, and there was no good reason for me to go. There was even a girlfriend at the time that tried to drag me to church, and I broke up with her for trying to drag me to church. That's how against it I was. I was not about to have all this Christian stuff.
So as you mentioned there that you had recognized that it's a fairly stark reality without all the spirituality, that there's not much, um, like you say, meaning or
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things. There's one thing believing in those kind of concepts, and it's another thing to live in those realities. How was your life as an atheist? Did you think deeply even about your own atheism, and what did you think atheism actually was, or how would you define that?
I would define at the time the I would define atheism as just I don't believe in God. That's how I was presented it, and that's just how I would always go for it. Looking back, I would probably say I was more agnostic than I was an atheist, but at the time, that's what I titled myself as. Being an atheist, I or agnostic at the time, I just didn't think about these questions. Like there wasn't like this mindset where I had come to the conclusion that life is meaningless and therefore I should just do whatever I want with this life now. I think I would find meaning and purpose in different things. I would find it in film. I would find it in music. I would find it in relationships. And so I would try to, in a sense, decide what my purpose was going to be for this life. But I also didn't, I just didn't really think about the big questions. I think I was too distracted. I think there was too much going on in my life for me to even think, why am I here? What's my purpose? Where did I come from? And even really thinking hard about my atheism. It wasn't until um, I took that second look at Christianity that I really had to think hard about what the implications were of my belief as an atheist. But at the time, I think I was just distracted. I didn't even consider any of these questions. All I knew was it wasn't true because there was no good evidence for it. I didn't like the way that Christians acted, and I didn't want anything to do with it.